Art has long been used as a tool to communicate political ideology and engage civic discourse. Take homemade posters of the 1960s, creating messages for movements fighting for civil rights and against the war in Vietnam. Or in the 70s, when album covers sold records and radical ideals. Or the 80s and 90s, when graffiti artists and muralists seemed to dominate the inner city streetscape. Today, the desire to open people's eyes and minds is, if anything, about to become even more urgent.
Our Arts and Social Justice Theme Week couldn't kick off with a better group of people than the four guests with us right now. None of them afraid to court controversy and challenge accepted thinking. First, visual and performance artist Dred Scott. Welcome back to BK Live, Dred. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're also joined by painter and storyteller Willie Mae Brown. Thanks for being here, Willie Mae. We really appreciate it. Elliot Jerome Brown, Jr., photographer and exhibitions coordinator at MoCADA, the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Arts. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And muralist Joe Matunis, who's also the mural director at El Puente. Thanks to the four of you very much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Nice to be here.
Maybe we could start by going around and first having you each tell us, how does social justice and activism reflect in your work? Dred, can we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the world as I know it and as we look at it is intolerable. It has been before Donald Trump, and it is today. And I think that, you know, the art actually has to sort of talk about and address some of the big questions confronting humanity. For example, I did a work that has become popular recently called "A Man Was Lynched by Police Yesterday," which updated a NAACP flag where they said a man was lynched yesterday. And so it's really looking at these big questions and trying to get, you know, an audience to think about how the world is as it is, but also how it can be radically different and far better.
Willie Mae?
Yes. Well, in my work, I am a writer, and so I write about what my life was like during the civil rights movement, which brings us up to date with what's happening now. And I try very hard with my work to have children understand what happened during the struggle at that time, and that struggle continues today. There is no difference. The Donald Trump in our time was George Wallace, and the Donald Trump in our time was the Ku Klux Klan and all of those people, and the Bull Connor and the Jim Clarks. So I am used to this. So my voice and my pen does my work.
Elliot?
Well, my work is just kind of just focused on like maintaining subjectivity within all of this, because I think it's kind of easy to lose yourself as an individual within all of this kind of like collective mourning and collective resilience. And I think it's important to like center how people are living their lives and refashioning their lives and how they celebrate themselves, but also like looking at how they mourn themselves at the same time. So as a photographer in my life, my work like, you know, goes into people's homes and sees how they use their home as both a private and a public space, a way of like fashioning their identity and how they engage with others and create social relationships and such. So really just kind of like emphasizing the individual in the work.
Well, public space, that just opened the door for you.
Right. Well, I am a community muralist, but also I'm a public high school teacher. So I work with adolescents throughout the course of the year. And the really important thing we start with is making sure that they understand that they are people who come from rich traditions of cultural production and not just consumers, and really giving them the tools to be able to begin to tell their own stories. And then when we move from that into doing the big community mural groups, projects, we make sure that we really have a long process so we can have as many voices as possible sharing in the production, creation, and design of those pieces.
So at the top of the show, Greg and I talked about some of the protests that are happening around the country, and people are heated and they're out there now. I want to speak to the artist's role in stoking those fires, because it's about to get cold outside here in New York. We're about to have all this turkey and start this shopping cycle and all these comforts that sort of lull people into, oh, you know, eggs cost the same amount of money. It still costs this much to swipe a Metro card. Your life hasn't changed that much, and the heat may get slowly turned up in ways that people aren't paying attention to. So how do the artists keep the focus on everything still has to stay motivating?
I think
Anybody? Willie Mae?
I just believe in being calm. Being calm and staying in your place with your family, and careful what you say, what you do, just being calm.
But Dred, there's a sense of urgency as well here.
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous sense of urgency. Donald Trump is a fascist, and I don't mean he's a bad man. I mean he's actually pledged to deport millions, round up millions more, and put them in databases, curtail free press, intimidate people through other violent means. He's got a set of shock troops that are out there already beating up, tearing down women with tearing off their hijabs. He's actually had people have had shotguns pointed at them. It is going to be a horror, and I don't think it's going to be that slow. And I think the big danger is that a lot of people are saying, oh well, there are checks and balances, or maybe we should give him a chance, et cetera, et cetera. In 1933, when Hitler actually got elected, people could have said, well, maybe he's not serious about all that stuff in Mein Kampf. That would have been and was actually truly dangerous. There's an article from the New York Times that came out in 1922 that was the first time they really talked about Hitler. And they were saying, oh, a lot of people think he's really not all that serious about all that anti-Semitism.
Take him literally versus that whole thing figuratively.
And so I think both for artists but everybody else, we better act as if the future of humanity depends on what we do right now. The thousands and thousands that are in the streets are very right. And I think that needs to go to tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and hopefully millions and say, no, this person is not our president. This person does not deserve to be anywhere near nuclear codes. We have to be in the streets and actually really force them to back off installing this guy. He is a horror for humanity. If you're living in Pakistan right now and all the horror of what Obama was raining down on you, what do you think that means when you've got a guy that's a president that says, I want to torture the people who are family members of suspected terrorists. I don't care. We're going to make waterboarding look fun. This is horrible. This is horrific, and nobody should accommodate or conciliate with it. We need to resist.
Well, what I think, and I agree with you on a lot of that, but what I think is that this is not something that happened overnight.
No, it didn't.
This was accumulative, and what people become wrong is that we don't follow the times. We don't follow what happened in the past that leads up to the future. It's just like in Islam, when things started with the Ottomans. It didn't start just last week. It was always there, and we forget. We forget where we came from. We forget who was in the doorway. Now we have this dragon in the doorway, and we are all aflutter. Okay.
So what's the best lesson of the civil rights era that is applicable in this day and time that we may have forgotten or need to be reminded
Stay
of?
calm and study that man. Martin Luther King said, we are going over that bridge. We are going to do the things we said we were going to do, but we are going to have a nonviolent movement. You cannot deal with someone as irate and crazy as Trump by being irate and crazy. You have to have a plan. And it's unfortunate that we are just now, or hopefully not, maybe someone behind closed doors is putting a plan together. But he's there. He has made his ascension. So why should we go charging the door? Let's figure this out.
Well, I think the question about what can artists do and how do artists work best to confront this, the things, I think Donald Trump, now we have a figurehead, but it was no accident that 50% of the people in this country voted for him. And those 50% of the people didn't just change their opinions because Donald Trump was the candidate. Right. I think things for poor people and working people and people of color in this country have been bad historically. That's nothing new. But I think, when I do my work with young people around the arts, the things that are happening now in terms of demonstrations. Can you change anything with a demonstration? No, you can't change anything by just having a demonstration. But it's a really good opportunity for young people to begin to feel the power of their own voices. As artists, yes, we can make banners, we can make placards, we can make puppets, we can train them on what the issues are, and we can make sure that they're out there and that they're vocal, and they find themselves as part of a movement that they may not have identified before they go to that demonstration. So, yeah, it's just one simple thing, but artists do have a very powerful voice and a role.
That's true. That's true.
And I kind of think,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think on that note, there's a lack of understanding between both sides. I think about that history that people are constantly mining daily within across various institutions and spaces, but I think that there's just like a miscommunication in how people are speaking to one another, because I think it blows my mind. I'm only 22, but it just kind of blows my mind that there's been so much brilliance around this subject and so much brilliance around how to treat people as human beings and how to begin to value them. And we're still faced with these issues. So I think that there's a lapse in what we're saying to one another that just isn't all the way there.
So, Dred, we can go back to you. I mean, your art is considered controversial at times. Why do you think it's considered that way? And moving forward the next 4 years, how do you think it will change in its revolutionary tone, perhaps?
I think that this is a society that's based on exploitation and oppression. It's a very polarized society, and if you make work that talks about some fault-line social questions and stand with the people that are oppressed, then people that actually are contributing to the oppression and benefiting from it are going to be upset. That's what's controversial. If you make a work that looks at the U.S. flag and calls people to discuss what U.S. patriotism is, some people actually, very much like what that flag is. Other people say, well, that's the flag that cops wear who shot my brother. And so that's where the controversy is. But I think what artists need to do, and I think we need to be in the streets. I mean, I was thinking of an artist, Ganzir, who was part of the Egyptian uprising that led to the toppling of Mubarak, and making murals of martyrs of people. That's very important. But museums like the Whitney Museum and the Guggenheim Museum should have a day in the next, couple months where all their work is covered in black or something like that. Theaters should actually have a half hour, Broadway theaters should have a half hour where every theater says, no, we are not going along with this. We should not peacefully transition or slowly transition to fascism. This is fascism. That's what Trump represents. He's got somebody who's basically like the head of the KKK, basically being appointed to be part of this transition team and going to run the White House. Breitbart, that is not good. And so I think people should, I think we should be calm and study, but I think we should be extremely passionate in resisting and actually not accept that all of this is predetermined and where it's going to go. So I think the art that I'm going to make is going to be even more radical and more out there and more revolutionary. But people that are, people have to find the ways that all our arts institutions, from the streets to the mainstream institutions, are actually deciding whether they want to tolerate and accommodate fascism or whether they want to resist it.
So what do you think is the pivot for arts organizations, some of whom rely heavily on government funding that's already been shrinking, and then they turn to corporations to get a little more money, or just piece together whatever they do to keep the lights on? What's the pivot for the organizations?
Well, yeah, it's been doing this for a long time, so there's always these cycles. It's never a good time to be a community-based organization, to be a poor working artist, doing somebody who's addressing these issues. Sometimes the funding is there and sometimes the funding's not. I think it's just a matter of standing by your principles, because this too will pass. I think that the people who are opposing this fascist regime really do need to be as organized as that fascist. The people on that side have been very quietly working, preparing for this moment. We really need to consolidate our resources and our efforts and say by no means will we capitulate or bow down or say okay, I'll take your money if for my silence. That's going to be really important, because you were talking about graffiti before. Graffiti rose out of the South Bronx in the 70s when they cut all the funding to youth programming into the arts. We don't want to take away funding, we don't want to take away programmings, but people have a way of resisting, especially through the arts, and speaking truth to power.
And I think, working for Mokata, it's a space that a lot of people within the community identify as a space where they feel value. They see themselves represented within that space, and they feel that they can contribute to that space, especially through public programming, which is not something that you'll necessarily experience in some of the larger arts institutions. So I think with Mokata, transitioning to this larger space that's on Fulton, and it already being a source of contention, in the news, it's a huge commercial Highland Loft. I think it'll be a huge source of importance for us in maintaining Lori's vision, to maintain that engagement with the community, to make sure that it is a space that is accessible and it is a resource and it reflects what people need.
Well, we appreciate the four of you engaging with your art, your actions, and your words, and we appreciate you for being here on BK Live. Thank you. Please come back again soon, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.